The room went quiet when his voice landed. Not loud, not angry, soft, measured, surgical. I don't think failure is the right word. That was the moment everything flipped, when the man my brother had dragged me in front of, the man he wanted to impress, looked past him and straight at me. My brother was still smiling then, still enjoying it, still unaware that the next few seconds were about to erase the story he'd been telling about me for years. Because 5 minutes earlier, he'd smirked, put a hand on my shoulder like he owned me, and said, "This is my sister, our family's failure." And everyone laughed. I didn't. I couldn't. I was too busy trying to breathe. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my story of betrayal, and if you've ever trusted the wrong person, hit that subscribe button because you are not alone. Here is how it happened. I want you to picture this clearly. A glass-walled office on the 22nd floor, a city stretched out below like it's judging you, leather chairs that cost more than my monthly rent, and me sitting there in a borrowed blazer that didn't quite fit, hands folded tight so no one would see them shaking. I wasn't supposed to be there. That much was obvious from the way my brother had framed it. This wasn't my meeting. This was his moment, his big introduction, his chance to finally step into the world he thought he deserved. I was just baggage. He'd insisted I come along, said it would be good for me, said I needed to see how real professionals operate. I should have known then. My brother never did anything unless it benefited him. Still, I went, because some stupid part of me still wanted his approval, and because I trusted him. I shouldn't have. I remember the exact second it happened, the betrayal, not the feeling, the sound, that smug little laugh in his throat before he spoke. We were standing. His boss had just walked in. Late 40s, calm eyes, no flashy suit. The kind of man who doesn't need to raise his voice because everyone already listens. My brother straightened instantly. "This is my boss," he said, pride dripping from every word. Then he turned to him, gestured at me like an object, and said the sentence that would echo in my head for weeks. "This is my sister, our family's failure." He smiled when he said it, like it was a joke, like it was earned, like he'd been waiting years to finally say it out loud in a room that mattered. There was a beat of silence. 1 second, 2, 3, long enough for my face to burn, long enough for my chest to tighten so hard I thought I might pass out. I felt small, reduced, stripped down to every mistake I'd ever made, every exam I didn't ace, every job that didn't last, every dream I'd quietly put on pause. And the worst part? He knew it all. I didn't speak. I couldn't trust my voice. I stared at the floor, counting the lines in the carpet, telling myself not to cry, not here, not in front of him, not in front of them. This wasn't the first time my brother had humiliated me, just the most public. Growing up, he was the golden child, straight A's, scholarships, praise at every family dinner, the one relatives compared their kids to. And me? I was the cautionary tale. She's just finding herself. She's sensitive. She didn't live up to her potential. Funny how those words sound harmless until someone weaponizes them. My brother always did. I was reading comments on my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized I wasn't the only one. So many of you wrote about siblings who smiled while cutting you down, family members who knew exactly where it hurt and pressed anyway. People who wore betrayal like a joke and expected you to laugh along. That realization hit me hard, because standing in that office, I felt completely alone. But I wasn't. I just didn't know it yet. The boss didn't laugh. That should have been my first clue that something was about to shift. He studied my brother for a moment, really studied him. Not with anger, with curiosity, like he'd just learned something important that didn't quite sit right. Then his eyes moved to me. Not dismissive, not pitying, intent. "I see," he said softly. My brother's grin widened, mistaking silence for approval. He launched into it then, my academic detours, my indecisiveness, how I couldn't stick with anything. He talked over me, for me, about me, like I wasn't right there. Each word felt like another nail. I wondered if this was it, if this was how I'd always be introduced, reduced to a punchline in someone else's success story. I wondered if maybe he was right, and that thought, that tiny poisonous doubt, hurt more than anything he said out loud. The boss raised a hand, just slightly. My brother stopped mid-sentence. The silence stretched. Not awkward, loaded. The kind that presses against your ears until you're forced to fill it with truth or cowardice. I could feel my brother beside me, shifting his weight, already impatient, already irritated that the spotlight wasn't where he'd placed it. The boss waited. Didn't rush me, didn't interrupt, didn't glance at his watch. That alone told me more about him than any resume ever could. "What do you do?" he repeated, softer this time. I swallowed. Every instinct in my body screamed, "Don't. Don't say too much. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't give my brother more ammunition to twist later." But something else, quieter, braver, pushed forward. "I build things," I said. My brother laughed. Actually laughed. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. "See?" he said quickly, turning to his boss. "This is what I mean. Vague. Always vague." The boss didn't react. He nodded at me. "What kind of things?" I took a breath. "I design systems," I said. "Digital ones, mostly behind the scenes. Automation, workflow optimization. I help small teams run like big ones." My brother scoffed. "She means YouTube tutorials and freelancing gigs." I flinched. The words landed exactly where he meant them to. Cheap, unserious, embarrassing. But the boss leaned back slightly in his chair. "Is that what you mean?" he asked me. I shook my head. "No, that's what he means." My brother stiffened. The boss's eyebrow lifted, just a fraction. "Go on." I didn't realize it then, but this was the first time in my life someone had given me uninterrupted space to explain myself. No eye rolls, no sighs, no pre-written narrative waiting to overwrite mine. "I left university," I said carefully, "because it wasn't teaching me how the world actually works. I learned faster on my own. I failed a lot. I rebuilt. I started solving problems for people who couldn't afford big agencies." I paused, heart pounding. "I don't have a neat title, but things run smoother after I touch them." The boss smiled. Not wide, not fake, real. My brother didn't notice. He was too busy crossing his arms, jaw tight, already preparing to reclaim control. "Well, it's not exactly stable. She jumps from thing to thing, no long-term vision." The boss turned to him for the first time since I'd started speaking. "How long have you been at your current role?" he asked. My brother straightened. 3 years. "And before that?" A flicker of irritation crossed his face. 2 years somewhere else. "And before that?" "Why does that matter?" The boss's smile faded, not cold, but sharp. "Because consistency isn't just about staying, it's about growing." My brother opened his mouth. The boss raised a finger, just one. "Let me finish." I'd never seen my brother silenced like that ever. "You see," the boss continued, voice calm but deliberate, "people who experiment early tend to fail publicly and succeed quietly later. People who play it safe early tend to look successful until the world changes." He turned back to me. "Who are you currently working with?" I hesitated. Names meant nothing without context. 3 logistics startups, 1 nonprofit, a content studio. My brother laughed again. "Exactly, random, no focus." The boss ignored him. "And what do they say about your work?"
I reached into my bag before I could second-guess myself, pulled out my tablet. My hands were shaking now, but not from fear, from adrenaline. "I didn't think I'd need this," I said, unlocking it, but I handed it over. The boss scanned the screen. Testimonials, metrics, before and after dashboards, quiet wins that didn't scream, but proved. His eyes narrowed, not in disbelief, but concentration. My brother leaned over, trying to peek. "Those could be fake." The boss tilted the tablet away from him. "Interesting choice of words," he said. My brother frowned. "What?" "Could be fake," the boss repeated. "That's usually said by people who didn't bother to check." He looked back at the screen. The room felt different now, heavier, like gravity had shifted. I was painfully aware of my brother's breathing beside me, faster, shallower. He tried again. "Look, I'm not saying she's useless, just not exactly impressive." The boss finally stood. That movement alone commanded attention. He placed the tablet gently on the table, then faced my brother fully. "Do you know why I agreed to this meeting?" he asked. My brother smiled, relieved. "Because you believe in my potential." He nodded slowly. "That's what I thought too." Then he turned to me. "But I'm starting to think I misunderstood where that potential lies." The air snapped. My brother laughed nervously. "Come on, you're joking." The boss didn't smile. "I'm not." Time slowed. I felt like I was watching something irreversible unfold from behind glass. My brother, so confident moments ago, was suddenly scrambling, recalibrating. "She's exaggerating," he said quickly. "She always does. She's good at talking." The boss's voice hardened just enough to sting. "She didn't talk much. She answered questions." He stepped closer to my brother, not threatening, revealing. "You see," he continued, voice calm but deliberate, "people who belittle others in public usually do it because they're afraid of being seen clearly. You handled it with restraint." I didn't know what to say. He studied me for a moment. "Has he always been like this?" I nodded. A pause. Then he said the last thing I expected. "I think you're in the wrong seat." My heart jumped. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward. "I didn't invite you here," he said carefully, "but I might want to keep you." Before I could process that, the door handle turned. My brother was coming back, and judging by the look on his face through the glass, he already knew something had gone terribly wrong. The door opened too fast. My brother walked back in like someone trying to reclaim territory that no longer belonged to him. His smile was gone now, replaced with something tighter, sharper, the kind of expression people wear when they sense power slipping through their fingers. He sat down without being invited. That alone said everything. The boss didn't acknowledge it immediately. He was still looking at me, thoughtful, as if finishing a calculation in his head. "I was saying," he continued calmly, "that I think you're in the wrong seat." My brother let out a forced chuckle. "She's just visiting. I told you she doesn't really—" The boss raised a hand, not to silence him, to dismiss the interruption entirely. "I wasn't speaking to you," he said. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They carried weight because of how effortlessly they were delivered. Like this wasn't anger. This was clarity. My brother leaned back, arms crossed again, but this time the posture didn't read confident. It read defensive. I felt like I was watching someone realize too late that they'd misread the rules of a game. The boss turned his chair slightly toward me. "Tell me about the nonprofit," he said. My brother scoffed. "This is ridiculous." The boss didn't even look at him. I hesitated, then spoke. "They were drowning in manual processes, donations tracked in spreadsheets, volunteers misaligned, reports months late. They didn't need funding, they needed structure. And what did you do? I rebuilt their back-end systems, automated donor reports, designed a volunteer pipeline, cut their admin time by 40%. The boss nodded slowly. And the impact? He asked. They redirected savings into outreach, increased community reach by almost double in 6 months. The boss exhaled through his nose, impressed. My brother snapped. Anyone can say numbers. The boss turned to him sharply now. Anyone can say them, he agreed. Very few can explain them. He looked back at me. How did you measure success? I answered instantly. Retention, response time, burnout reduction. That did it. The boss smiled again, but this time there was something final about it. He stood. The room seemed to rearrange itself around that movement. I need you to understand something, he said, addressing both of us now. I don't hire titles. I hire thinkers. My brother nodded quickly. Exactly. That's why And thinkers, the boss continued, don't introduce people they claim to care about as failures. Silence. Thick. Suffocating. My brother's jaw tightened. You're reading too much into a joke. No, I'm reading through it. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, city lights reflecting off the glass. I've seen this pattern before. High performers who are threatened by proximity, they minimize others to elevate themselves. My brother stood up abruptly. This is unfair. The boss turned. What's unfair, he said evenly, is bringing someone into a professional environment under false pretenses and then attempting to humiliate them for sport. I felt my chest tighten. Not from fear, from relief. The boss walked to his desk and pressed a button. Linda, he said into the intercom, cancel my next meeting. My brother's eyes widened. Wait! I'm not finished, he said. He looked at me. I'd like to offer you a consulting trial. The words barely registered. What? 3 months. Internal systems review, process optimization, paid. My brother laughed too loud. You can't be serious. She doesn't even... The boss cut him off instantly. She understands bottlenecks better than half my senior staff, and she didn't need a title to prove it. I felt dizzy. This couldn't be happening. The boss leaned forward slightly. You'd report directly to me. My brother's face drained of color. Excuse me? He said. The boss didn't look at him. I'd also like to clarify something. This opportunity is independent of your brother. My brother slammed his hand on the table. That's not how this works. The boss's voice went cold. That is exactly how this works. I was acutely aware of my brother's breathing again, but now it was ragged, uneven. You're undermining me, he said. The boss tilted his head. No, you did that yourself. He gestured to the chair across from me. Sit, he told me gently. I obeyed. The power shift was unmistakable now. Where my brother once dominated the room with noise and narrative, he was now reduced to a spectator in his own meeting. The boss opened a folder. Your background isn't linear, but it's honest. He slid a document across the table. Read this. I skimmed it. My hands shook. Consulting agreement, scope, compensation. It was real. My brother stood there, staring. You didn't even check her references, he said weakly. The boss looked up. I did. My head snapped up. You did? Yes, he said, while you were outside. My brother froze. I made 2 calls. Both confirmed the same thing. He looked at my brother. You leave systems better than you found them, he said to me. Your brother leaves people smaller. The words sliced clean. My brother tried one last time. "You're making a mistake. She always disappoints." The boss stood again, this time looming. "No, she refuses to play the role you assigned her." He turned to me. "If you accept, this stays professional, no family interference." I nodded, barely able to speak.
My brother didn't move. He just stood there, frozen between disbelief and humiliation, like his mind couldn't decide which emotion to process first. The room that had once felt like his stage now felt hostile, every surface reflecting back a version of him he'd spent years pretending didn't exist. "Reevaluating my position?" he finally said. His voice cracked on the last word. The boss didn't flinch. "Yes," he replied. "That's what I said." My brother laughed, but it wasn't the laugh from earlier, not smug, not superior. This one was sharp and hollow, like glass under pressure. "You're going to punish me for a joke?" he said. "For family dynamics?" The boss's eyes hardened. "No," he said. "I'm going to review you for professional judgment." He gestured toward me, not dramatically, not accusingly, just factually. "You attempted to undermine someone with demonstrable value in front of leadership for personal gratification." My brother shook his head. "You don't understand our family." The boss leaned forward. "I understand enough, and I understand workplaces even better." I sat there, heart pounding, barely breathing. This wasn't vindication, not yet. This was something far more dangerous: exposure. My brother had spent his entire life building a narrative about me, about himself, about who deserved respect and who didn't. And now that narrative was cracking right in front of the one person whose opinion actually mattered to him. "You can't do this," my brother said quietly now. "I've given years to this company." "And in those years, how many people have you spoken over?" Silence. "How many ideas have you dismissed because they didn't come from someone with the right background?" More silence. "How many times have you confused dominance with leadership?" My brother clenched his fists. "This is unfair." "No, this is overdue." The boss turned to me. "I'm aware this puts you in an uncomfortable position," he said. "Working in proximity to family rarely ends well." I nodded. "I didn't come here for this." "I know," he replied. "That's part of why I trust you." My brother snapped his head toward me. "So now you're playing innocent?" The boss's voice dropped an octave. "That's enough." My brother stopped instantly. The boss continued, eyes still on him. "If you say one more word to discredit her, this conversation ends very differently for you." The threat wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. My brother swallowed. The boss exhaled, then softened his tone slightly. "This isn't about choosing sides," he said. "It's about standards." He walked back to his chair and sat. "Here's what's going to happen," he continued. "She'll begin a 3-month consulting trial. You will have no authority over her, no access to her work, no influence." My brother's eyes widened. "You're cutting me out?" "I'm protecting the integrity of the process," the boss corrected. "And me?" my brother asked. "What happens to me?" The boss folded his hands. "You'll continue your role," he said, "for now." My brother exhaled sharply, relief flashing across his face, until the boss added, "But I'll be observing." That relief vanished instantly. I could feel my brother's gaze burning into the side of my face. Not anger, calculation. This wasn't over for him. It was just postponed. The boss stood again. "We're done for today," he said. "You'll receive next steps by email." My brother didn't move. "Is there a problem?" the boss asked. My brother forced a smile. "No, of course not." He turned toward the door, then paused. He looked at me, and for a split second his mask slipped. There it was, resentment, fear, and something darker, something I hadn't seen before. He leaned in just enough for only me to hear. "You think this means you've won?" he whispered. My stomach dropped. Before I could respond, the boss cleared his throat. "Is there something you'd like to say to your sister," he asked calmly, "that you're comfortable saying in front of me?" My brother straightened instantly. "No, nothing at all," and he walked out.
The door closed. The silence afterwards felt different now, not oppressive, expansive, like space had finally opened up. The boss sat down again and looked at me with something close to concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure it was true. "I didn't expect any of this," I admitted. He nodded. "Neither did I." He paused. "People reveal themselves under pressure," he said. "Your brother revealed insecurity. You revealed composure." I let out a shaky breath. "He's always been like that." The boss studied me. "And you've always let him define you?" The question wasn't accusatory, just curious. I looked down at my hands. "I didn't know how not to." He leaned back. "Well," he said gently, "today was a start." We talked logistics for a while. Access, timelines, confidentiality. It felt surreal discussing deliverables when my entire understanding of my family dynamic had just been shaken to its core. As I gathered my things, the boss added one final note. "There's something else you should know." I looked up. "I didn't ask him to bring you," he said. My heart skipped. "What?" "He insisted," the boss continued, "said you needed to see what real success looks like." A chill ran through me. "So that tells me," the boss said, "that on some level he already felt threatened." I swallowed. "So be careful," he added. "Success has a way of provoking people who benefit from your silence." I left the building in a daze. The city felt louder now, sharper, like everything had been turned up a notch. My phone buzzed before I even reached the sidewalk. A text from my brother. "You embarrassed me." Another followed immediately. "Don't pretend you didn't plan this." My hand shook as I stared at the screen. Then the last message appeared. "We're not done." I locked my phone, because deep down, I knew he was right. This wasn't over, not by a long shot.
The first week felt unreal. Not triumphant, not celebratory, unsteady. I kept waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say there'd been a mistake, that the contract was void, that I'd misunderstood the entire conversation. But the emails kept coming. Access credentials, calendars, introductions that referred to me as consultant. No qualifiers, no explanations, no footnotes about family. Just my name. And every time I saw it, something in my chest tightened, not with pride, but with a strange grief. Because this was the version of me I'd been trying to become quietly for years, and it took public humiliation for anyone to finally see it, especially my brother. I avoided him. Not out of fear, out of strategy. I knew how he operated. Confrontation was his fuel. Reactions were his currency. If I gave him either, he'd spin it into a narrative where he was still the injured party. So I worked. I buried myself in process maps and system audits. I asked questions no one else had thought to ask because they'd accepted inefficiency as culture. I documented everything, twice. And slowly, unmistakably, things started to shift. Meetings ran shorter, reports landed on time, teams stopped firefighting and started planning. People noticed. They always do, eventually. The first comment came from someone I didn't expect. An analyst from another department leaned over during a cross-functional review and said quietly, "I don't know what you did, but this is the first time in months I haven't stayed late." I smiled. That's the goal. Word spread. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way that matters. People asked for my input before decisions were made. And somewhere in the building, my brother was watching. I could feel it. The glances that lingered a second too long, the sudden coldness in shared spaces, the way conversation stopped when I walked into the room, not because I wasn't welcome, but because no one knew which version of the story to believe anymore. And then came the email. Subject line, Process Review Findings, Phase 1. Sent by me, CC'd to leadership. My brother was on that list. I hesitated before hitting send, not because the work wasn't solid, but because I knew what it represented.
This wasn't just data, it was proof. I clicked send. The fallout was quiet at first, too quiet. Then the questions started directed at him. Why hadn't these issues been flagged earlier? Why were teams compensating for gaps leadership didn't acknowledge? Why had one consultant identified inefficiencies internal teams had normalized for years? My brother started staying late again. I noticed because I didn't have to. He confronted me 3 weeks in, not in a meeting, not professionally, in the parking garage. "You think you're clever," he said, stepping into my path. I froze. The echo of his voice bounced off concrete. My keys felt heavy in my hand. "I'm just doing my job," I replied. He laughed. "Don't play innocent. You're making me look incompetent." I met his eyes. "You did that yourself." His face darkened. "You always had to prove something, even as a kid, always trying to show everyone you were special." I took a breath. I was just trying to survive. That seemed to throw him. For a moment, I saw something like confusion flash across his face. Then it hardened. "You think they respect you now?" he said. "You think you belong here?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The next day, the boss called me into his office. He didn't waste time. "He needs to ask you something," he said. I nodded. "Has your brother been interfering with your work?" My stomach dropped. "No," I said carefully, "but he's not happy." The boss sighed. He leaned back. "He's been defensive in meetings, territorial. He questioned your data publicly." I felt heat rise in my chest. "Was there an issue with it?" "No," he said. "That's the problem." I swallowed. "I'm telling you this because transparency matters, and because I want you to be prepared." "For what?" I asked. The boss looked at me steadily. "People who build their identity on being superior don't respond well when that illusion breaks." 2 days later, it happened. A meeting I wasn't invited to. My name mentioned without me present. I found out because someone forwarded me the agenda by mistake. Topic: role alignment and consulting scope. My brother's name was listed as lead. I felt the old doubt creep back in, that familiar voice whispering, "This is where it turns. This is where you lose it." I took the document to the boss. He read it once, then smiled. "Good," he said. "Good?" I blinked. "Yes," he replied. "Let's see what he does when he has to explain himself." The meeting ended badly. I didn't attend, but I heard. My brother overreached, criticized outcomes he couldn't explain, tried to reframe my work as temporary fixes. Someone asked for specifics. He had none. Someone else asked for alternatives. He deflected. And then, quietly, decisively, the boss stepped in. "I think we're asking the wrong questions," he said. Everyone went silent. "We shouldn't be asking whether the consultant's work aligns with our goals. We should be asking why it took an external perspective to see problems this obvious." That was it. The room didn't explode. It closed. That evening, my brother called. I didn't answer. He texted.
I didn't open the email right away. I stared at it, cursor hovering, heart beating a little too fast. There was something about the subject line, "next phase," that felt heavier than everything before it, like a door that only swings one way once you touch the handle. When I finally clicked, the message was brief. Too brief. "I'd like you to join tomorrow's leadership review. There are developments you should hear directly. A." No context, no reassurance, no warning. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. This was it. Whatever had been building quietly over the last few weeks was about to surface, and I knew, deep down, that my brother would be in that room. The next morning, the elevator ride felt longer than usual. Every floor it passed tightened the knot in my chest.
I replayed every interaction, every word I'd chosen carefully, every silence I'd maintained. I wondered if staying professional had been enough, or if simply existing in that space had already crossed some invisible line. When the doors opened, the conference room was already half full. Senior leadership, HR, legal, and my brother, sitting rigidly at the far end of the table. He didn't look at me when I walked in. That scared me more than if he had. The boss entered last. The room stood automatically. He gestured for everyone to sit, then took his place at the head of the table. "Thank you for making time," he began. "This won't take long." Famous last words. He folded his hands. "We've been reviewing performance, structure, and conduct across teams, not just outcomes, but how those outcomes are achieved." I felt my brother shift beside his chair. The boss continued. "In the last month, one external consultant identified and resolved inefficiencies that had been normalized internally for years." He glanced at me briefly. "Just a second. Enough." He went on. "This raised a question. Was this a failure of visibility or a failure of leadership?" Silence. My brother finally looked up. "We've also reviewed communication patterns," the boss said, his voice steady. "Meeting transcripts, feedback loops, escalation behavior." My brother's jaw tightened, and something concerning emerged. The boss turned to him fully now. "You consistently positioned yourself as the final authority while dismissing input that challenged your perspective." My brother leaned forward. "That's not fair." The boss didn't react. "You also introduced a family member into a professional setting under false pretenses and attempted to publicly undermine her credibility." My brother's face flushed. "I already explained that." "I'm not asking for an explanation. I'm stating findings." HR shifted uncomfortably. The boss took a breath. "As a result," he continued, "we're making structural changes." My heart pounded. He looked at my brother. "Effective immediately, you're being removed from your current leadership track." The words landed hard. My brother froze. "Removed?" "Yes," the boss replied. "You'll transition to an individual contributor role while we reassess fit." My brother stood abruptly. "You can't do this." "We can," the boss said calmly, "and we are." My brother laughed, sharp, disbelieving. "Because of her?" The boss's voice went cold. "Because of you." The room held its breath. Then the boss turned to me. "And as for you," my pulse roared in my ears, "we're extending your contract." I blinked. 6 months, expanded scope, and pending final review, an internal offer. I felt dizzy. My brother stared at me like I'd betrayed him with nothing but my existence. "You planned this," he whispered. I shook my head. "I didn't." The boss interjected. "This meeting is not a negotiation." He looked at my brother. "You're dismissed." Security didn't escort him out. They didn't need to. He left on his own, shoulders stiff, pride dragging behind him like something heavy and broken. When the door closed, no one spoke for a moment. Then the boss exhaled. "I know this is difficult," he said to me, "especially given the personal history." I nodded slowly. "What matters now," he continued, "is how you want to proceed." I hesitated. "With the role?" "With everything," he said, "including boundaries." I understood what he was really asking. "Professionally," I said, "I'm committed. Personally, I'll need distance." He nodded. "That's wise." Later that day, my phone buzzed. A message from my brother. "You destroyed me." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "I didn't destroy you. I stopped covering for you." He didn't reply. That night, I lay awake thinking about how thin the line is between loyalty and self-erasure, how often we're taught that protecting family means absorbing their damage. and how freeing and terrifying it is to finally step out of that role. Because I knew something else now. This wasn't the end. It was the moment before the truth fully surfaced, and when it did, there would be no going back.
The fallout didn't come immediately. That was the mistake everyone made, thinking the decision itself was the climax. It wasn't. It was the trigger. Because people like my brother don't explode when they lose power. They implode first, quietly, strategically, and then they try to take everyone else down with them. 3 days after the leadership review, my access was restricted. Not revoked, not blocked, just delayed. Files took longer to load, permissions required manual approval, meetings were rescheduled without explanation. Small things, plausibly accidental things, but I'd spent years building systems. I knew sabotage when I saw it. I documented everything. Timestamps, screenshots, email threads. Because if there was one thing I'd learned from growing up in my brother's shadow, it was this. When someone is losing control, they don't stop lying. They escalate. The boss noticed too. He called me in late one evening. "Something's off," he said, "and I think you know what." I nodded. "He's not done." The boss sighed. "No, he isn't." He leaned forward. HR flagged a concern. My stomach tightened. "About me?" "Yes," he said. "An anonymous report." I didn't blink. "What does it say?" "That you manipulated outcomes to discredit internal leadership, that you exaggerated inefficiencies to create dependency." I laughed. Once. Short. Bitter. "He's projecting," I said. "I know," the boss replied, "but accusations trigger process." I nodded slowly. "Then let's follow it." The investigation began quietly. Too quietly. HR interviews, system audits, review panels. My brother wasn't allowed to contact me directly, but that didn't stop him from trying. A voicemail slipped through one night. "You think you're smarter than me," his voice sneered. "You think they won't see what you are. I built this place. They'll believe me." I saved the message. I didn't respond. The tension in the building was palpable. People whispered, avoided eye contact, picked sides without saying it out loud. I could feel the weight of being the outsider again, the one everyone watched closely, waiting for a misstep to confirm their doubts. But something unexpected happened. People started coming to me, quietly, cautiously. An engineer showed me a chain of emails my brother had buried months ago, warnings he'd ignored. A project manager shared notes from meetings where concerns were dismissed outright. A junior analyst handed me data discrepancies they'd been told not to escalate. Each one said the same thing in different words. "We tried. He didn't listen." The narrative was cracking. The final review meeting was scheduled for Friday. Everyone knew it mattered. The boss didn't frame it dramatically. He didn't have to. The silence leading up to it did all the work. The conference room was full again. HR, legal, leadership, and my brother, sitting straighter than I'd ever seen him, calm, polished, dangerous. He spoke first. "I want to say how disappointed I am that this has come to this. I've always acted in the company's best interest." He looked around the room, practiced sincerity in his eyes. "My sister is intelligent, but she lacks context. She misinterpreted challenges as failures, and leadership was too quick to validate her conclusions."
My pulse spiked. He turned toward me. "You've always wanted to prove you were better than me," he said softly. "This was your chance." The room went still. The boss didn't interrupt. That worried me. My brother continued. "She weaponized partial data, created doubt, undermined trust." Then he sat back, confident, finished. The boss finally spoke. "Thank you. Now let's look at the full record." He nodded to HR. The lights dimmed. The screen came alive. Emails, dates, ignored warnings highlighted in red, meeting transcripts where concerns were raised and dismissed, performance dashboards showing decline long before I arrived. Then something else, a slide titled Pattern of Conduct. The room shifted. This wasn't about systems anymore. This was about him. The boss stood. "You accused your sister of exaggeration, but every issue she flagged existed before her involvement." He clicked the remote. A new slide appeared. Audio waveform. My brother's face drained of color. "What's that?" he asked calmly. "A voicemail, left after the investigation began." The recording played. My brother's voice filled the room, mocking, threatening, furious. "They'll believe me. I built this place. They'll see what you are." Silence followed, thick, crushing. My brother stood abruptly. "This is a setup," he snapped. "You've been collecting things against me." The boss's voice was ice. "No," he said. "You provided them." HR spoke next. "We also reviewed access logs. You attempted to restrict consultant permissions outside protocol." My brother looked around wildly. "I was protecting the company." Legal cleared their throat. "That constitutes retaliation." The word landed like a hammer. My brother turned to me then, not angry, desperate. "You could have stopped this. You could have said something." I met his eyes. "I did," I said quietly. "Years ago. You never listened." The room absorbed that. The boss stepped forward. "This review is complete, effective immediately." My brother interrupted. "You can't fire me. I gave everything to this place." The boss didn't raise his voice. "We're not firing you." My brother exhaled sharply, relief flickering. "We're terminating your employment for cause." The words echoed. Security appeared at the door. Not aggressive, just present. My brother laughed. A broken sound. He looked at me one last time. "You're still a failure. Without me, you're nothing." I stood. For the first time in my
The building felt different the following Monday. Not quieter, just lighter. Like a pressure system had finally moved on, leaving clean air behind. People smiled more easily. Meetings ended on time. Decisions were made without posturing. The absence was unmistakable. My brother's absence. No announcement went out, no gossip-filled email chain, just a calendar update where his name no longer appeared, and an empty chair that no one rushed to fill. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. And for the first time in my life, that stillness didn't scare me. I stayed. That was a choice I didn't expect to make so easily. The boss offered the internal role 2 weeks later, formal, documented, clear boundaries, no special treatment, no family footnotes, just responsibility and trust. I accepted, not because I needed to prove anything anymore, but because the work mattered. and because I finally understood the difference between being seen and being defined. There were moments, of course, moments when an old reflex kicked in, when I'd brace myself before speaking or instinctively soften my words to avoid making someone uncomfortable. Years of shrinking don't vanish overnight, but something fundamental had shifted. When I spoke now, people listened, not because I was loud, because I was precise. My brother tried once more. A month after his termination, a message landed in my inbox, not work email, personal. "I hope you're happy." I stared at it for a long time. Then I archived it, not out of cruelty, out of closure, because happiness was no longer something I needed to justify to him or to anyone else. I thought a lot about failure after that, about how easily the word is thrown at people who take non-linear paths, how society confuses speed with direction and conformity with competence. I had failed, yes. I'd failed exams, failed interviews, failed expectations that were never mine to begin with. But I hadn't failed myself, and that turned out to be the only metric that mattered. One evening, the boss stopped by my desk as I was packing up. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about that day you first came in." I smiled faintly. "So have I." He leaned against the desk. "Your brother thought he was introducing a liability." I nodded. "He actually introduced an audit," the boss said dryly. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. Then he added, more seriously, "You handled all of this with restraint. That's rare." I shrugged. I didn't know how else to survive. He shook his head. "That's not survival. That's integrity." The words settled somewhere deep in my chest. I won't pretend it all wrapped up neatly. Family dinners became complicated. Some relatives chose sides. Others pretended nothing had happened. Silence filled the spaces where forced politeness used to live. But here's the truth no one tells you. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives, slowly, honestly. I kept building. Systems, teams, trust, and eventually a life that didn't require me to explain myself every time I entered a room. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that first moment, the smirk, the laughter, the word failure tossed like it was harmless. I don't replay it with anger anymore. I replay it with clarity, because that moment didn't define me. It revealed him. If you're listening to this and it feels uncomfortably familiar, if someone in your life benefits from you being small, quiet, uncertain, hear this. Your growth will feel like betrayal to them. Let it. People who love you don't need you diminished to feel important, and anyone who introduces you as a failure is terrified of what you'll become if you ever stop believing it. I didn't win by outshining my brother. I won by outgrowing the story he told about me. And that's a victory no one can take away.